Agile is it's not really about process. It's really about the three things we always talk about: how do you form teams, how do you build backlogs, how do you produce working tested software. I feel like a little bit of a broken record in the industry right now, because it's like I feel like I'm saying the same things all the time. But I still, just as I go out into the community and I talk to people and I listen to people, it's like everybody's still fairly anchored on culture first. Everybody's anchored on process. How do you do Scrum? How do you do safe? All those kinds of things. And I'm just still absolutely convinced that what we have is we have a problem of organizational design, organizational architecture, that kind of a thing. And so what's fascinating to me is I think our industry is actually stuck right now, and I think the long term impact of that being stuck is that at some point people are going to start thinking Agile is ineffective. And so when I was talking about the evolution of Agile or where Agile's going, I think that's where it has to go. And so I guess to answer your question, it's not like I feel like Agile's evolving and we're trying to keep up with an evolving market. Like, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to figure out how to continue to push the market so that this stuff actually works, right? Because that's the problem that I have, is that this stuff does work if you do it right. But if you're constantly beating the culture drum, you're constantly beating the process drum, then if you go into an organization that just can't form teams, can't build backlogs, can't produce working tested software, there's just no amount of process or culture that's going to fix that. What Agile's really about, at the end of the day, it's about teaming strategies, right? The early days of agility, Agile was a small team thing. And if you go back to the early Agile projects, the early XP projects, the early Scrum projects, you had a dedicated cross-functional group of people that sat in a room together around a conference table. They had an embedded customer. And what they were doing is that they were recognizing that there was all of this volatility, all of this uncertainty. And by getting everybody in the room and collaborating with that customer in real time, you actually could make magic. What really made Agile work in the early days was that cross-functional team of people that worked together and collaborated and were in the room together with that customer, building product and constantly iterating and constantly testing. And so you wrap that core structure with process, and then everybody remembers the process, and then they forgot what actually got us there, which was the people in the room working with the customer. And so as we start talking about Agile at scale, we've taken the practices that worked in that room, but we overlay them on top of an organization that isn't teams in a room with autonomy to change their software, working with a real-time customer. And so we adopt the practices without the underlying ecosystem that actually made those practices work. Methodologies that are popular right now. Scrum remains popular. Scaled Agile framework remains popular. To some degree, large-scale Scrum, less, remains popular. PMI acquired Disciplined Agile Delivery, and it required some of Al Shalloway's Flex model. And I personally just don't believe that any of those methodologies actually work if we're not willing to create the ecosystems underneath them that they were designed to operate in. And so any Agile methodology becomes a fad diet if you're not creating the conditions for it to actually work. So digital transformation, I think, is part of the story, but I think it goes hand in hand with the Agile story. DevOps is part of the story, but it goes hand in hand with the Agile story. So at the end of the day, Agile is about organizing around customer value. And it's about having teams of people in an organization that are aligned to customer value and can obsess about providing value to that customer. And so when you have a team of people that are able to obsess on the customer, then what you get is you in effect have an agile team that can deliver and get feedback and all those things. And then so in that context, something like DevOps, right, actually makes sense, right? We have a team with the ability to deploy infrastructure as code and to push software to the cloud and to make it instantly available to the people that need to use it. Things that were manual, that team has the opportunity to digitize and to put into computers. And so at the end of the day, it's all about getting a team of human beings into an ecosystem that allows them to obsess over the client. The organizational design and the organizing around value is like it's like the first thing. It's like you've got to get that right. And then your testing strategies fall into place. Your deployment strategies fall into place. Your digitization strategies fall into place. Your teaming strategies fall into place. Your flow of value problems fall into place, right? But if you're trying to do those things in isolation, what you end up is you get your classic local optimization problem. You fix one thing, you install the DevOps, or you do the digital transformation work, or you implement the new testing strategies, but it's on top of that broken ecosystem. And what happens is that people don't get the full value out of it. Because at the end of the day, like the challenge is that organizational change is hard. And we have companies that are out, with good intent, building software that helps optimize the deployment pipeline. It's helping us to digitize and make things more efficient. But it's kind of like the idea that, to the guy with the hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so you have people that don't understand how to do organizational change, providing tools to people that don't have the agency within organizations to make the changes. And so we end up with a lot of software and a lot of practices and a lot of ideas that are built on top of these broken organizations. And it actually doesn't help. It actually doesn't help the flow of value. It doesn't help with the ability to put things in front of customers and to be able to learn and to get feedback and to be able to pivot and to adapt. And so my belief is there's a lot of things going on in the industry that if we figure out how to get the organization right and we get the organization operating with greater business agility, then those things that we're talking about actually become real. They become more effective. They become tools of change and better performance. But in the absence of the organizational transformation underneath, you just end up with just more overhead and more things supporting a broken organization. Doesn't actually solve the problem. I think you have people that don't share the same fundamental beliefs, right? I think that's a thing. But then other times it's like they're looking at their organization and they don't see a path to actually manifest those beliefs in real time. And so that cognitive dissonance causes them to do things like go through the motions of Scrum, but without everything and everyone necessary to do it. I mean, the classic question that we get asked is, how do I do Scrum if I don't have a product owner that shows up and represents the business every single day? Well, the answer to the question is you don't, right? I mean, you can do daily stand-up meetings, you can do sprint planning, you can break things into backlogs, and you can go through the mechanics of Scrum. But if you can't get the business and IT product development into lockstep where they're partnering together in a collaborative way, right, it breaks. And so you see the problem on both sides. You see the belief problem, and then you see the inability to affect organizational change problem. And so what Leading Agile does, like what we've brought to market fundamentally, and you see it in our approach, it's like we educate, right? So we put tons of information out into the market. And then the people that believe what we believe tend to call us. And then when they call us, what we've done is we've built a methodology that helps the organization suspend disbelief long enough to prove that it actually works. So from a first phone call, so somebody's been educated in the leading agile ecosystem for years, and they've come to believe what we believe, and they get on the phone with us, and we talk about like how do you get executive buy-in, and we have lots of meetings with executives before we ever actually even engage. And then once we engage, then we start with like a really high level workshop that aligns everybody around principles. And then we do this exercise called a define the end state that takes sometimes a couple months, where we actually create a hypothesis for what the organization is going to look like and a roadmap for how to affect the change. And then you orchestrate the changes in such a way that it actually is effective from day one. And it's like, I don't have to get everybody in the organization to believe what we believe, but I get them to make the changes necessary and then prove the results. So there's actually an art and a science to being able to get an organization to start to move. But we built a methodology to actually help organizations go down the path of structured, disciplined, provable, metrics driven change in a way that's incremental and iterative and actually demonstrates value every step of the way. I mean, all of this stuff takes time. And it's not just going to training classes. It's like you have to change how the organization fundamentally behaves. And a lot of people, they haven't done the thought exercise. They don't have the 12 years of history doing it. And so they just can't see how to move it. So again, like the big problem in the agile industry right now is that you have tons of organizations that are just going through the motions of doing agile, and they're getting maybe some benefit, but it's just not delivering the promise that we've been talking about for the last 20 years.